From getting $18 million to stop racing for McLaren to being reduced to a reserve driver for Red Bull, there are chances that Daniel Ricciardo will never race again. And it looks like some well-known F1 drivers agree with that. Like former Australian F1 champion Alan Jones has zero faith in Daniel. I mean, you'd think that because they've got the same nationality, he'd have Ricciardo's back, right? Well, wrong. Because he's not just predicting Ricciardo's future, he's literally putting an end to it. And not just that, but Jones has some incredible praise for Ricciardo's replacement in McLaren. Like that's gonna sting when the Aussie champion you look up to is praising another guy who just joined Formula One.
I think balancing school and racing was tricky, but rewarding. I think finishing school for me was a pretty proud moment, and also gave me a good distraction away from racing. So I think for me, staying in school was really beneficial and obviously very important in life in general.
So, the thing is, Jones is really skeptical of Ricciardo's skills now, saying he knows a lot more about activities outside the cockpit rather than in it. Like, don't beat around the bush, Alan, just say it. I mean, were things that bad in his time in McLaren that his team decided to onboard a rookie in his place? Probably. Because to apologize for the breakup, McLaren compensated Rick with a hefty $18 million. And if I were to get that much to stop racing, you sure bet I would. But Danny didn't really completely end his Formula One journey. In fact, he's living the life in Red Bull colors right now. It feels great to see him on that team again. But this time, he's not racing. And he's also not around most of the time. He went home right after bagging the third driver deal with Red Bull. So he's probably chilling with all those energy drinks and sponsorship gifts. But with the Australian Grand Prix right around the corner, we may get to see more of him. And right now, that's all he does. Show up to events, talk to the media, and do a whole lot of social media marketing for the top team. And then he goes home. So, if you ask a random person who doesn't know anything about F1, they'd probably think he's just an Instagram model making a paycheck through those interviews. And sad to say, that's probably what Daniel's life is now.
Definitely learned over time, like never say never. You don't know what the future holds. So it's not that I ever ruled out in my head that I would return to the Red Bull family, but yeah, like 4 years ago, I certainly thought it was a long shot,
Like even F1's former champion, Jenson Button, thought it was a strange decision, because he's not going to get anywhere in that third seat. Even in free practice sessions, you need a young driver to gain exposure. And Daniel's no young driver, all right? So he can't take part in those free practice sessions as well. And because of that, Daniel might become irrelevant in the F1 world. Which makes me question, was the move to Red Bull really worth it? And for now, there isn't a yes or no answer. But it was clearly better for Ricciardo, since driving that McLaren really made him lose his mojo. And seeing how things are going for them right now, losing their mojo isn't the only loss for McLaren. Giving it your all and having a car decide whether your career stays or not was something that probably bothered Rick, because he was done with McLaren way before they dropped him. He felt as if his confidence was being eaten away in that car, and it just wouldn't work with him. And many of us assumed that McLaren was designing both cars to suit his former teammate Lando Norris. So to finally rebuild himself and find the mental peace he lost in that car, he finally decided to head home.
We look forward to it. I don't actually know Oscar too well. I've spoken to him maybe twice ever, I would say. But he's obviously a good talent, a good driver, and I look forward to that. But that's still half a year away.
Yeah.
Already playing the main games, aren't you?
Home being where Red Bull was, of course, but home in general as well. And even though he's a reserve driver, he's being paid under the team ambassador title. That too, $2 million a year, which is significantly lower than the compensation salary given by McLaren. But come on, at least he can let his mental health breathe now. Speaking of being the team's ambassador, I think that's all he'll ever be in the Red Bull colors, because the Verstappen-Perez duo isn't going anywhere soon. They've got that Hamilton-Bottas type of chemistry, and I don't see any reason why Red Bull will not re-sign the Mexican anytime soon. And Max, well, he's in his prime, and no team would miss out on a champion in his prime. So, safe to say, the Red Bull driver roles are full for the coming years. So Danny might need to set his sight for another team if he wishes to race anytime soon. But even with other teams, it may not be possible. I mean, look at Ferrari and the Leclerc-Sainz partnership. Like, sure, their car isn't performing as well as last year, but since their duo is so loved by the fans, it's probably why Tifosi is on the rise. And I can't see any of them going away or having their contracts ended. So that rules out Ferrari. As for Mercedes, well, they're still trying to milk that 8th championship out of Lewis Hamilton. And George Russell is a serious talent too. All in all, if Danny's eyeing a driving role in any of these top teams, then it's safe to assume that he won't be racing in the 2024 grid. And honestly, he might just never race on that Formula One grid at all. His age, recent results, and unforgiving history in McLaren all count against him. But the real question is Daniel Ricciardo okay with not driving in Formula One anymore? I mean, he said he's not foaming in the mouth to drive the Red Bull car, so that's an answer, right? Well, not exactly. Because like every other reserve driver, he still hopes to race at least once during the year. Maybe one last ride, Well, as much as we may not see him on the track, he's still driving, alright? Just on a simulator. And so far, he's doing okay with that. He really needs this year to finally get his confidence back. And what's better than being cheered on in Red Bull colors without the politics and exhaustive vibe that comes along every race weekend? Like, even right now, he's finally gonna pick and choose which destination he wants to tour around, unlike how a normal F1 driver is dragged across the world for racetracks. So if this year off brings another light to Ricciardo that he's got more to living than F1, then maybe he might just be fine with leaving his Formula One journey behind. And not gonna lie, he's got a lot of money to live luxuriously for the rest of his life, so it'll be okay if he never races again. But being on the grid since 2011 does bring him a lot of supporters and fans who look up to him. So would fans ever be fine knowing that Daniel Ricciardo is in the past now? Simply put, no. I mean, they're already infuriated that Daniel was reduced to being a third driver after spending more than a decade in that industry. Like, they finally got the band back together, but they're not loving how it's going so far. So do you just expect us to be like, okay, one more driver down, let's move on? Because that's not how it works. No one will like it knowing that Ricciardo won't be there for 2024. I mean, he has brought more smiles than anyone on the racetrack. And back in the day, I was rooting for him to move up the ladder from third to first in the championship. And now I'm just hoping that he drives again in Formula One. But with how things are going right now, chances are that Daniel Ricciardo will never race again.